Hi everybody, it's Andy Mack here. Just bringing you a project update for my 15mm Monmouth Rebellion project, 1685. Happened in England in the West Country, where the Duke of Monmouth landed and tried to create a rebellion, and was quite successful at recruiting quite a few people for a period, but it did fizzle out, and was put down by James II's forces. Obviously, it was the preliminary to the Jacobite rebellions, because obviously, in a couple of years later, William of Orange invaded with an army, Dutch army, and being married to the English princess, was able to take the throne on invitation to a certain extent. It's mentioned. But anyway, so it's been a slow progress, various reasons. I've now retired. So I've obviously, the leading up to retirement, it's always hectic, lots of things to sort out, and also with my family, we've had elderly relatives that's needing quite a bit of attention. So it's been quite a number of distractions. But I have got the mojo, and I have had the mojo, and I've done quite a bit of work. There's quite a lot yet to be finished, but in work in progress on this project. I've also spent, interestingly, one of our relatives who actually was unwell and needed attention does actually live in Lyme Regis, which is where Monmouth landed. So that was quite a coincidence. I was able to go to a number of areas looking at the architecture and the things, because I do plan to obviously scratch build some things as well. So anyway, this is the government's army for 1685, James II, or some of it anyway. It's the first regiment here is Trelawney's. There's a little bit of finishing touch up. I've got the flags to put on. I'll come on to the flags shortly, talk about that, but also a few of the little tiny bits to just finalise. So this is Trelawney's at the front here. They were one of the two Tangier regiments, and then Kirk's is here. You see the flag there. I need to redo that, but I've got some proper flags for Kirk. So, but yeah, they were Tangier regiments that were sent to brought back to for the rebellion by James. And then behind them, we have two guard regiments. One is on the right-hand side, the Coldstream Guards. Their flag's yet to be done. And then on the right here is First Guards. And the First Guards, interestingly, was a double size, 2 battalions strength. So there's also a First Guards there. And at the back there is the Queen's. The Royal Scots Regiment. Just got a touch up there, as you can see, some of their hat bands are a bit wide, so I've got to just finish off them, and also some of the points of their pikes. The pikes, interestingly, I've used the Pendragon not Pendragon, big one, the irregular miniatures who I've used. When they send out their pikemen, they send out sort of piano wire, which is quite heavy. But I've used florist wire instead, so which is a lot lighter, and then I covered it in Yoo-hoo glue, or not Yoo-hoo, sorry, sort of that very, very adhesive glue to strengthen it, and it seems to work okay. It's a lot lighter, and they may ping out occasionally, but they're very easy and quick and cheap to repair, so it's a very cheap process. So the flags, I'm sorry I haven't done all the flags. Now, with the flags, there's no specific I can find 15mm Monmouth Rebellion flags. There are flags of the period, because obviously you've got the Mulberrian and a number of wars around that time, whereby the flags are slightly adapted. I noticed, interestingly, some of the flags for the Scottish regiments were actually what I need were for the period for the Mulberrians, so I'll make use of those. And then there's some of like that one there, the Trelawneys. I need to a slight adaptation on some of them. Things like the insignia. I've got from Pendragon again. I've got a number of flag packets, but I might just have to adapt them. Here's a flag packets from Pendragon. They're very good, but some of them, for instance, Trelawney's, you see the one here, this is Hastings' flag for the period, a regiment called Hastings, who were interestingly fought at Killiecrankie. So I will be using Hastings later on when I use the regiment for Killiecrankie, because they were, interestingly, Hastings also had the yellow facings on their coats. But with with the sorry, my nails are very dirty in gardening. Um, with the Hastings flags, they have a sunburst very similar to this, but not in yellow, obviously, in a sort of white colour. And they do also have a devices. I think they do have a devices as well. So no, not Big Bun, not for that's Hastings. For Trelawney's flag, they have a burst like that, a sunburst, but it's in a sort of whiter, light yellow, white colour. And then, but they also do have the devices of the crowns and so forth. So a little bit of manipulation needed, and similarly for some of the other regiments too. I've so a little bit. I was thinking about actually hand crayoning some flags or doing it with photocopying and things like that. But I think I just use those. But I might just have to touch up some of them. Also, at this scale, when furled, you can hide devices if they're not 100% accurate, and there is a degree of poetic license as well for historical flags, because obviously they didn't just have one or two flags, they'd have a number of companies would have different flags, and it's quite feasible that flag devices and things would change over a campaign or over time. So what we have documented, is known, but there's a lot we don't as well. So that's the flag. And the other thing I'm a little bit unsure of is the length of the flagpoles of this period, because I noticed I've been following some of the 25 mil people who do beneath the lily white banners, is it? Beneath the lily banners, which is Barry Upton, I think, and there's the various other wargamers who present, some of them very, very good. League of Augsburg presents a very, very good period 25 mil presentations on YouTube, and I'd recommend watching it. But I noticed the flags are very big, and also the flagpoles seem to be quite long. I was always under the impression from the English Civil Wars particularly that the flagpoles weren't that long. They're long enough to take the actual flag and then a little bit further so that they could be furled. But I might be wrong on that, but they weren't actually that long. So anyway, that's all stuff in motions, but the flags will be done shortly. Yeah, so I'm at sort of phase 1 point where I think I've reached almost. It will be needing to finish off the flags and then do the tentage for the regiments, because there was 4 man per tent, I'm led to understand. So that'll be about 20 or 30 odd tents I'll do for them. Now, interestingly, it is quite significant, the tentage for the campaign of Sedgemoor, because before the tents arrived, which is around about when the marching army got to, I think it was around about when they're at Keynsham or in that area, outskirts of Bristol. That's when the governmental tents arrived, which meant they didn't then have to billet themselves at towns, and they were able to, obviously at Sedgemoor, they kind of pinned the rebel army in Bridgewater by camping at Western Zoyland, which I'm sure wouldn't have been able to accommodate the amount of troops that they would need to if they hadn't had tentage. So I think tentage is a factor of a campaign to a certain extent, depending on the weather, obviously. But obviously, I think I'm not sure what the Monmouth's army, whether they actually bivouacked, and obviously that's the other option for armies on the march, would be to bivouac. And I dare say they slept in parish churches and things like that for shelter. But tentage was a factor, I'm led to understand, and they didn't have them originally. So yeah, logistics. So do the tents, and I do plan to do quite a lot of scratch building, as I said. So and so after this, so that's phase 1. I did make a little note actually. The next bits will be obviously the cavalry. Now I've done quite a lot of other units and stuff already for it, but none of them are quite finished. So it would be James's cavalry and militia. There's quite a lot of militias, quite a factor in these campaigns. So I'll be doing militia units. Now, quite a few of my militia units are almost ready. But I'm also planning to move on to do the Killiecrankie campaign of 1690. So some of those militia units will be doubling up as Scottish units. So a little bit of a thought around facings and stuff like that as well, because there isn't a terrible amount known about the militia units of the West Country at that time. Some uniforms are known, but there are a number that aren't, and there's a lot of conjecture around independent companies and so forth being created. And then we've got so stage 2 will be James's cavalry and the Killiecrankie units. and also begin my the Scottish units. And then stage 3 is the Monmouth infantry and cavalry. Again, I've started putting them together. Interestingly, with Monmouth infantry, I'll do a picture on them. I had to do quite a bit of milliput because I couldn't find enough variants of troops to represent the sort of the various recruitment pool that they had, and how many of them were actually tradesmen and weavers and things like that. So they would have had quite a base of civilian clothes, albeit they did have a backbone of experienced troops in purple. They who were, and by the time they actually came to fight, there was quite a lot of trained soldiers. So it would seem. I have actually managed to do a bit of sort of green stuff and things, making things like Monmouth caps. Not Monmouth being the place, not Monmouth with regards to this, but was an agricultural and common headwear of the period, which just sort of looks like a bit like wearing a bucket, to be honest, a woolen bucket on your head. So I've modelled some of those and tried to make a lot of woolen hats as opposed to all the felt hats that you get in the governmental armies. So hopefully that will look okay once it's done. And I'm doing a fair bit of variants around the pikemen, because some of irregulars they supply a unit of would seem what we'll call them rebels, but they're also carrying pitchforks and things like that, and spades and whatnot. And so, but if you look at them, you can actually turn them into pikemen. So going on and beyond this period, then those pikemen might be able to serve one in the Monmouth army, but also further afield in the Scots Jacobite armies, because some of them were under uniformed and things like that, and in the Irish Jacobite army. So it's quite a broad church I've began here, but we're going to keep it simple at the Monmouth stage, and that's where we're at really. So yeah, I've done quite a bit on of preparing all the other phases of the battle. Where did I get to? Phase 3. Oh yes, and then so that was phase 3 was Monmouth infantry and cavalry plus the Scottish, and then phase 4 was terrain, maps and gameplay. Now I plan to use in the main the 1 to 20 scale, which is the WRG George Gush rules. However, some of the battles are very small, so I do actually plan to upscale some of these regiments, particularly the guards and stuff. So although these are at sort of 24 man per unit, make them sort of 32 man, because it's quite an awkward period, because some of them were actually quite small, like Trelawney. I think there's only 4 companies of Kirks, so that would only be approximately 4 bases of what you see there at Sedgemoor. But of course they were garrisoning towns and one thing after another, and sent to different parts of the West Country. So and then also there was an order during the campaign where James asked for quite a number of the regiments to go from 50 soldiers as a company to 100 soldiers as a company. So a lot of them were then directed to recruit further soldiers. So that would mean that if they get the max, it would almost double the size of the regiments. Anyway, so I will be, and then there's also, I've got quite a lot of single units and double units for casualties and for skirmish actions, because skirmishing will be a feature of this campaign, and small actions as well. So whether I stick with WRG rules for that entirety, or whether I'll use, there's also the is it Fields of Glory Renaissance. I've got those, and I'm sure there's some skirmish rules that I'll be able to find, which I may need to use if there's some small actions. And then I thought about maybe running it as a campaign, so you would need a map and a bit of gameplay around that, which might make it quite fun. I have the One King, which is by Steve Carter, which covers a period very well, and there's also obviously the Scottish campaign, which I'm probably going to do as well. So there's quite a lot of scope there. Now it seems I haven't done an awful lot, but it's certainly I've got a lot of things preparing and a lot of ideas as well for terrain, and I've been doing quite a lot of studying of all the areas around the architecture. I've got an article on the architecture of the area, and there's various Facebook groups which I've been a member of as well, which cover the Monmouth period. which is quite interesting. Some interesting tidbits from that. So yeah, being very busy now. I should have more time now to accelerate my project. So it should move from a slow burn to more of a Bunsen burner, one hopes, particularly over the winter, because it is a very sort of cost-effective and winter-friendly activity, painting soldiers and projecting. So that's it. That's what, 15 minutes 20. So that's it for the time being. I don't think I've missed anything out specifically. That's it where we're at now. So just run it in quickly so you can see so I say the flags will be redone. So yeah, the faces aren't particularly well done, are they? So I will be maybe doing a bit more on those. There's a bit of touch up needed, but yeah, this is them. But when they're on, for the Mass Effect, I think they look all right, and they certainly, when you bring them up to, once they got all their, I've done 2 flags per unit. Once you've got each regiment has 2 flags. I think it will look quite good. So that's it. Okay, Andy Mac. Bye for now.